All right, folks, I think we've got 12:05 here, so we'll go ahead and get started. So before we dive into it, make sure that you eat all the goodies in the back of the room. The less I have to take back, the better. And for those of you on Zoom, enjoy your lunch that you're hopefully getting as well. So really quick here, for those who are on Zoom, just a few quick things. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube page in about a week or so. So if you want to look back or wanted to maybe share it with someone you know who couldn't make it today, that is going to be an option. For those of you on Zoom, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and enter those in the chat and we'll answer them at the very end. Those of you in the room, hold them until the very end or write them down. Curtis, you got that little scrap piece of paper, you're ready to go. And you can also use the chat for any technical questions. We've got Josh here to help us moderate, make sure that technology doesn't turn against us. So hopefully all will go smooth that end. Yes. Oh, you fancy there. All right. Good call. Okay, so with that, then we'll go right into it. And I'm gonna bring up the rest of our executive board here. So this is kind of the layout of what we'll be speaking today. And I think I'll go ahead and hand it over to Mike.
Right. Thank you, Kelsey. I'll add my welcome to those of you who are here in person and those who are online. Thanks for spending a little bit of your day with us. My name is Mike Postian. I currently serve as the chair of partners, and I farm with my family over by Walcott. So I've really enjoyed being involved with partners. I think doing a lot of great work, and you're going to hear about a lot of that today. So just for those of you who don't know a lot about us, our mission is to improve the stewardship of Scott County watersheds. And the main ways we're doing that is through education, technical guidance, and volunteer opportunities. Here's our board. You've already met Kelsey, who's our coordinator. You're going to meet Steve and Amy here shortly. They're going to give you some of the information in the presentation today. Carter is our treasurer, and then you can see the rest of our board members listed down there below. A range of people representing different municipalities, just residents of Scott County. I feel like we've got a really good mix of folks who are passionate about water quality and want to contribute towards improving it here in Scott County. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is a review of our snapshots. So partners have been doing snapshots for over 20 years now, where we go out throughout the county, sample different bodies of water, do various tests. So we've got quite the database by now. And so we're going out and doing that 3 times a year. So as you can imagine, it's a pretty significant undertaking to do that. Getting all the volunteers organized to go out and collect all the samples, analyzing the samples, and then finally analyzing the data. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Amy next. Amy or Steve to talk about the background behind what the snapshots look like. So take it away, Steve.
Hi there, I'm Steve Gustafson. I'm Vice Chair of Partner Scott County Watersheds. So this kind of background of Snapshot. It says 239 historical samples. We're actually up in the 300s at this point. When we talk about going out in the spring, summer, and fall at the Snapshot sites, we narrowed that down to 62, kind of all in rural and urban and suburban areas. As Mike said, I've been doing it since October 2000, but most of the sites are around 2002. So we're at the 20-year mark. There is other testing in the county in the past that's done by these different state, federal, and municipalities that we kind of added to our database. And for our snapshots, what we're doing, we're looking at nitrate and nitrites, ammonia, phosphorus, chloride, pH, dissolved oxygen, temperature, and transparency. These are kind of easy things to test and get an idea of what's going on. They don't require a lab analysis per se. We can get a good picture of what's going on. And then when we do have the funds, we'll do additional laboratory analysis on things like nitrate, nitrite, phosphorus, fecal DNA, herbicides and pesticides, stuff that we can't do in-house. Then obviously I wanted to say thanks City of Davenport and their water pollution control plant was able to do laboratory analysis for 10 or so samples of Snapshot on nitrate, nitrate, and phosphorus. And all this data was available if you so choose on our website, or Kelsey and I can get it for you. As of yesterday, 29,860 individual records are in our database. 354 sample sites that I've seen where someone's collected something. Now it could be one sample or it could be 50, you know. E. coli I hear a lot about. We haven't done a whole lot in a while, but almost about 2,000 tests we have on there. The herbicide pesticide suites, that's basically a suite of herbicides, a suite of pesticides. That could be 6 or 7 different types within there. We've done 23 sets of those, but that's $150 a sample, so it's not as easy to do. Almost 3,100 nitrate tests, 31 and 3,800 phosphorus analyses that are in there. And there's other, we didn't include everything on there. Like we have probably 300 fecal DNA analyses. You know, it's hard to get everything on one slide. The 2022 snapshot. Do you might keep on going or?
I was at a couple of them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's okay. So the snapshots again, spring, summer, fall. We get a different group of folks who can come during the weekday in the spring and fall than we can this summer. And this summer we had a record turnout out in Eldridge of over 60 volunteers, and it was super great. We try not to get more than 4 persons per site because then it's just kind of an oversaturation and somebody's left out of doing a test or recording data. But that was really amazing to see. So we get a lot of people coming out for that. We also do a biological sampling in the summertime, looking for bugs and fish and things like that. And it's a little bit easier for younger kids to participate in that type of thing. It's on a Saturday and bugs are cool, right? So for Snapshot, we couldn't do it without all of these different partners. We got some tablets that kind of make the record keeping or entering information a little bit easier. It uploads automatically to our site, so we don't have to type it all in by hand and then do another thing with the spreadsheet. So it kind of helps eliminate some of that data entry from Kelsey, which is great. And then again, the lab analysis from the treatment plant. And then we got a orthophosphate chlorometer that Steve will use to do the analysis for phosphate for all 62 sites. So everybody collects a separate one, and then he graciously has agreed to do that on his own time after the fact. So yeah, it's all right.
You need like a hook that pulls me. So nitrate, that's one of the nutrients we hear about a lot in the media. And we have, like I said, we have quite a lot of data. What I show here in the chart is I'll take those 62 sites and then basically figure out which ones are rural, which ones are urban, and then I look at the trends over time. And I'm not selecting probably 50 of those 62 sites. I have enough data that I want over 10 years of data so I can get a good trend of what's going on. If some of our sites are too new to do that on. So like you can see countywide, 56% of our sites had an upward trend. In the rural, it's 57, urban 53. So you pretty much could say nitrate has an upward trend in the sites that we are looking at, you know, and you can see which ones are stable and which ones have a downward trend. Obviously, we'd like to see more downward trend. That's kind of a goal. The site averages, basically for 2022, I was just looking at 2022 data. The rural averaged around 5 parts per million, urban suburban was now 3. The range was 0 to 20 parts per million. And just to give you a frame of reference, there isn't a standard per se for nitrate except for drinking water, which is 10 parts per million. Otherwise than that, it's when I'm talking to DNR and other folks, they just basically said, we'd like to see a downward trend, you know, and that's all we can do. I don't think there'll be a standard. I don't know that a standard could easily be developed because every water body is different, except for the drinking water part, obviously. When we talk about database averages down below, the overall is the entire 20-year data set. Every sample on average in the county is 3 parts per million. every site that I looked at in 2022 that averages 4 parts per million. If I look at the average in 2021, it's 3. Now, it looks like, oh my gosh, it jumped up 1 part per million. Well, what I'm trying to do is that might have been 3.4 parts per million in 2021, and 3.9 in 2022. But if anybody's done this, we don't have data that's in the tenths. So I have to round up or round down, basically. So there was probably a slight increase. I almost said next slide to myself. Phosphorus is the twin sister of nutrients that you hear about a lot. This one is really, nitrate isn't concerned, but phosphorus seems to have a more of an effect. It doesn't take much for a water body to become eutrophic or an abundance of vegetation cause a problem, because basically the research I've found is you have anything above 0.1 parts per million can cause excess vegetation. So the same kind of thing now. You can see a lot of our sites are stable, countywide, rural, and urban. Again, no urban sites have a downward trend, and about a quarter of our sites have an upward trend. You can kind of see like urban has a higher phosphorus concentration on average than rural. There might be a myriad of different reasons for that, but they're fairly close. And our database averages, again, I'm a little more confident on that we jumped up a 5/500ths of a part per million, but overall our average is 0.4. So most sites that we have exceed that 0.1 kind of guideline. It's just ubiquitous. That's just the way things are. But it's stable. For the most part, a lot of our sites are stable. So that's different than nitrate, Sure, it's a little bit higher, but it's not getting any worse, hopefully. Transparency. This is basically how dirty and clear the water is. It's related to turbidity, but it's opposite. It's basically how far light penetrates. And a good rule of thumb is if your turbidity transparency is less than 30 centimeters, kind of got a problem. Things are too dirty for aquatic wildlife. This is opposite. You want the number to be higher. The higher it is, the clearer the water. So if anybody's done that turbidity tube, you'll heal out that tube. And if you can see all the way down in it, that's great. You've seen 60 centimeters, that's clear water. If it takes you all the way down and you can't see it with that much water, it's a dirty water. So again, urban is a little bit less clean than rural, but they're basically statistically the same, and 2022 had on average, a lower reading. And I think that might be related just to when we went out and the fact that we had a pretty dry year. So it might have been influenced by just a lot more vegetation in the water. It's hard to say. I try not to concentrate on year to year. I look more at my trends, percentages. And as you can see here, we have overall more sites are going down, and urban is about equal, sites that are stable than going down. So it's not a trend we really like, but it's not as pronounced as it is in nitrate. Lots of different reasons for that as well. Chloride. As you can suspect, this is more of an urban problem than rural, but I've noticed that if you look at the rural percentage of sites, 56% of our sites have an increase in chloride. And usually that's indication of road salt. It doesn't have to be, it can be something else. But I don't know if more rural roads are getting road salt applied. And it's not a huge increase in the trend, but it is an upward trend. So in 2021, our average was 57 parts per million. Now we've jumped up to 67. Obviously, the urban has a higher average. It makes sense. To give you a little context, the water quality standards for chloride for acute is 300 parts per million. So we have some sites that are getting close, like 384 parts per million, but that's like a one time. It's not a continuous average. I've been out in the winter and I'll go after a snowstorm and I'm getting 3,000, 4,000 parts per million, which makes sense. We provide salt like we probably did today, It's not long lasting. So again, I'm looking at trends, like I said, most of our sites have an increasing trend. The rural one kind of catches my eye, but we're kind of far away from where it seems to be a problem. And I know like some cities are using more of like a beet juice kind of mixture. So they'll probably see some of these going down eventually just by different avenues. Dissolved oxygen. Now, this is an important one for aquatic wildlife that we check on a lot. You basically want anything above 5 parts per million is good. I work for the Corps and we do a lot of ecosystem habitat restoration. Some people will say, well, they don't want above 12 parts per million because it gives fish the bends. They haven't been able to explain that completely to me, but we just go with the lower limit, you know. So if we're getting close to 6 or 5 or 6 parts per million on average, I tend to get concerned. Like, and there's a couple of sites, a couple of creeks like Candlelight and Hanlon. Vanderveer Pond has come up a few times where the dissolved oxygen is getting a downward trend and the average is getting low, where I'm getting a little bit like, we probably should look into that. And I didn't talk about some of the other sites of concern that I had, you know, for these other parameters, but it just kind of depends. Like Hickory Creek will come a lot, Mud Creek will come up a lot in concern sites, Spencer, Stafford Creek, Hanlon, Candlelight, Goose, Upper Duck Creek. So Kelsey basically said this slide was boring because everything's 8, you know, but that's okay. Boring is good in this respect, because that just means on average, we're within that range. We're above 5 parts per million. Yeah, there's some sites of concern that Amy and I have talked about doing some things on. It's simple as even just adding stones in a stream to kick that water up, basically aerate it. You can increase the dissolved oxygen. So there are trends basically a little bit concerning with the rural, where you have more sites that have a downward trend, but again, a downward trend with the average being 8 parts per million, I'm not too concerned about. I really don't have any rural sites except maybe Upper Duck Creek, where I'm concerned about a dissolved oxygen problem.
For the record, I said it was good boring.
Good point. Okay, thank you. I'll just, can I do this one? Okay, sure. So Amy had talked about our macroinvertebrate index of biological integrity measure. This is another way, kind of a granular way to get an idea of like what's out there, what's actually living in these small streams that we just kind of pass by, you know, because a lot of people write them off like, oh, there's nothing in there. Well, there actually is. Everything's kind of a habitat. And this is a way you can look and say what kind of species are in there, and it tells you whether there's poor, fair, good water quality. And like I said, it's kind of granular, you know. But what I like to see is the IBI less than 1. We've never had a site since we've been doing this for 3 years that's dominated by pollutant tolerant species. It basically says only the guys that can survive anything live there. You know, we're kind of in the middle, and then we have some that are up in the upper range. So it's good. There is sufficient habitat for those particular ones. Now, obviously, we won't, that's not 20 years of data. It's 3. And we're only doing maybe 10 sites a time, you know, so, and only do it 1 time a year in July. So it's a good sign, but we're just going to keep on doing it. And hopefully that'll equate to what we're seeing in other things. This is kind of a quick rundown of some of my conclusions. That obviously nitrate and phosphorus, they're not just a rural concern. They're not just an urban concern. They're everywhere. You saw the trends. You know, the urban sites are increasing, the rural sites are increasing. So it's a joint effort. Transparency, we talked about, you know, there's some streams, some undesirable trends, but that's a very local thing that it's hard to say without doing investigation with that particular stream, what might be the problem. I didn't talk about pH. The pH is kind of boring, like DO, like dissolved oxygen. We want basically between 6 and 9 on the pH, and we are about 7 or 8 on average, and there aren't any problems at all. Usually, if I catch something, we'll go out and retest it again, and it usually ends up being like there was something wrong with the equipment or something like that. But now we have the pocket penetrometer, pocket meters that basically are, and not a strip, but an actual device that measures it. So we don't have that as much. Dissolved oxygen, I kind of talked about as well, that generally we're all right, but there's a few streams of concern that Amy and I have plans to address. A couple of them are in Bettendorf, so we'll see if they are interested. Chloride, again, more of an urban suburban concern, but I'm going to watch the rural one and see where we're at. Talked about benthic invertebrates. Some of the things we didn't talk about. We call this MST, microbial source tracking. It's fecal DNA. Now everybody talks about E. coli. Well, E. coli is just an indicator species of possible fecal contamination. What we've been able to do is use a DNA analysis to say, is this human? Is it cattle? Is it pig? Is it dog? The problem is it's $300 a sample. So we can only do so much. I'm surprised we've done so many. Davenport has done a lot on their own, and through Amy. So, but obviously that's in Davenport, and we haven't been able to hit the rural areas as much just because it's so expensive. We did do a little bit of it, and really in the urban areas, what we're finding is human and dog are pretty much what you see as far as fecal contamination. We did bird and didn't see anything, which is surprising for Duck Creek, but whatever. And so that one, we're trying to do more with that because we feel it could help solve some of the fecal problems, rural and urban, and Amy and I obviously are looking at different things with Augustana College, on how to address this problem, which it's ubiquitous and every county has the problem. We're just trying to, can we get further? Can we get more information? It's just very, very difficult. It's expensive. Talked about the herbicides, pesticides. We did 23, which seems like a lot, but for me, that's not. And I had some small hits, but a lot of that is timing on when you sample and where. And that's the same kind of thing. I mean, each one sample is $300. And so that adds up quick when you're a nonprofit and we just don't have the funds to do that. Iowa DNR will test for some of these same things, but they're only doing it at 3 sites in our county, at the Wapsie at DeWitt, Lost Grove Lake, and Lake of the Hills. Otherwise, they are not coming in and doing like we're doing over the entire county because these don't have the funds, the manpower, and I don't blame them. They have to worry about the entire state, So we're getting a little bit more down in the weeds, obviously, but I can't say that herbicides and pesticides aren't there. I just don't have enough data to say anything. I'm just saying the stuff so far we haven't detected hardly anything, but that doesn't mean I didn't miss it. Another thing that I didn't really talk about, and we kind of talk about it later, was trash. Obviously, it's an urban area. There's a lot of trash in our urban streams, and Davenport and some other folks. We have cleanups and we're looking at other different ways to deal with things. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's kind of a conclusion that we don't really get in our snapshots, but it's probably something I would bring up, that urban garbage is sometimes overwhelming. I think that's all for me. Oh, man. So you tricked me. I'm sorry. Okay. So that's kind of like talking too many undeniable trends for nutrients and rural transparency, chloride. We're probably average for our county in Iowa. I don't have enough data to really know because we're one of the few counties in Iowa that's been doing this for a while. Polk County, Dubuque County maybe are similar to us. A lot of counties just don't do this. They don't have the structure. I'd say their biggest concerns are the nutrients and fecal bacteria impairments, and chlorides getting on the radar. And one thing I always say unique about Scott County is our streams, our headwaters originate within our borders. We can't say it's Muscatine or Cedar or, Clinton County. They originate and they go out. So we can blame ourselves essentially for some of our issues, but we can also means that we have a way to deal with them. We don't have to rely on somebody else. There you go.
As you can see by the photo up there, Steve likes to chat so much that he's famous now. So we've talked about our snapshot data. Now we're going to turn to some of the other things that we're working on, because while snapshot is a huge undertaking, there's quite a bit more that we're doing. And you can get a quick glance at that here. You can see we've been putting in a lot of work this year to reach the different parts of our communities in Scott County, reach the different age groups, and try to make as big of an impact as we can. So the first one I wanted to touch on here, this was the day that Steve became famous, right? Just moments after he waded in the lake in that photo there, but we held a pond management workshop early summer at Westlake Park, and that was co-hosted by Scott County Conservation. So we had about 30 people, and these ranged from folks that were in the conservation realm to just landowners who had a pond on their property in the county. So we did some targeted mailers before this and actually sent out postcards about this event to everyone in the county with a pond on their property. So that was a lot of database digging. So thanks for that, Steve. And at this workshop, we talked about 3 main topics. We went over water quality, kind of the stuff that we just talked about here, those different parameters, went into wetland habitats and how to have more than just a depression with water in your property, but actually a habitat and a landform that has its own ecosystem. And then we brought in Tyler from Iowa DNR to talk about fisheries management and covered so many great things in that. So that was a great day. We also had sponsor from Riverside. So good day there. Lots of good discussions. Feels like forever ago. That was a good day. Another thing that we've been doing in the education realm is reaching out to students. So as part of our mission, you know, we talk about stewardship, and stewardship starts early. So we've been working a lot in the schools and in community events to be getting out there and connecting with these kids. So done a bunch of different programs, and one that I really wanted to highlight is actually in that bottom corner there with the Save Our Watershed. So just last month, went out to Riverdale to the Forest Grove Elementary School. There we go. I wanted to say Riverdale Elementary, that wasn't it. Forest Grove Elementary, and talk to these kids about litter, pollution, and trash in our watersheds. And part of this program, it was with 2nd and 3rd grade. So we were talking about, you know, why trash is bad and how it enters into the streams. And then what they did afterwards was create these anti-littering posters. So they spent about half of the time working with their groups, getting their heads together, figuring out what kind of messaging they wanted to share to their classmates. So there was, about 15 posters made by the end of this day. And these posters, if they haven't already, are going to be going up around the school so they can help educate their friends. And can't see, let me use the mouse here. So this one, maybe my mouse won't show. The one in the middle, it says, "Please do not litter." That one's pretty self-explanatory, but there's a little picture in the side talking about how animals can get hurt. The one in the bottom left corner, that one's the bag's journey to the ocean. This was probably my favorite, don't tell the kids, but had that river or stream, whatever they drew in the middle there, and had plastic bags, entering them and talking about how it's bad for the environment. And there were so many more. They were so cute, and probably one of my favorite programs we did this year. Another really fun program we did was the floating classroom. So this is our 2nd year doing this now, where we brought students from Spring Forward, the Rock Island after school and summer program, out onto the Mississippi River for the day. We did this for 2 days with 2 different groups. And as you can see, the kids were out on these boats that we had with Living Lands and Waters. And for a lot of these students, it was their first time on a boat, their first time on the Mississippi River, their first time going into one of these channels. So it was a really cool day for them. We saw eagles, we saw turtles, so many cool things. They got to go play in the water. They got to do water quality. Great day all around. And we have some more videos on our website of that. But we had about 25 students from Rock Island for that day, and plan to do this again next year. Another big thing that we did this year, as Mike mentioned in our mission, is to provide volunteer opportunities to, again, bring that stewardship, connect people to the resource. So you can see we had a number of cleanup events all around the county with all different groups. And as I mentioned in that earlier slide, we had 39 bags of trash picked up, and those are like full trash bags. And we also did a lot of the work specifically at the Crow Creek Wildlife Management Area. So this is a site that partners adopted from the Iowa DNR in 2020 to help them As Steve mentioned, they're busy doing things all across the state. So we've partnered with them to kind of help manage and improve this site. So we had 3 work days there. And 13 of those 39 bags came just from this site, which it's only, 76 acres. It's not a very big site to be removing that much trash from. But we've partnered with a bunch of different groups for that. So the first day that we held was just for anybody who was interested, and we were removing some of the cedar trees from along the shoreline to help open that up and create some fish habitat there. We worked with United Way Dave Caring and had folks from John Deere, from different realtor groups, just regular individuals that wanted to volunteer that were out. And just more recently did a work day with some of the St. Ambrose University men's lacrosse team, and we put them to work for sure, getting some of the brush out of there. So as you can see, we had about 76 volunteers this year, putting in over 200 hours. So a lot of awesome work happening there. We've also been busy providing technical guidance. So this year we did 8 site visits to different landowners across the county, going out to their properties, seeing what their individual issues are. Some of them were streams, some of them were ponds, some of them were series of ponds, and trying to help them figure out what the problem was and maybe some solutions. We also did monthly tests and some of those lab analyses at Robin Creek, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. And then for the Crow Creek Wildlife Management Area, in addition to these work days, we put in 4 grant applications to do some pretty large improvement projects there, which include a boat ramp for some accessibility and some trail improvements. Fingers crossed as we're awaiting the results of that grant, or a couple of those. So now I'm gonna go ahead and hand it off to Amy and Steve here to talk about the Robin Creek biofilters.
Okay, well, the impetus of this project, Steve found some research from Franklin County, Ohio, where they were doing an experimental project where they took this material. It's kind of like a metal scour pad, if you've seen those kind, but it's a plastic, but it's got this netting, and they were putting in strips of it on a smaller creek, with the theory or hopes that with some sediment buildup, it would remove nitrate or bacteria through those filters. So Robin Creek is a smaller size trib in Davenport, and so we put in a series of 3 of these along the creek near the dog park, not the one down by the river, but the other end of Marquette, if you're ever interested and want to go check them out. And so these biofilms are trapping things coming down through the water. And Steve crunched some numbers, and it looks like we've got some positive trending thus far, but we've only been sampling for 1 year, 2 years. And so we want to do that for consecutive, and potentially it might lend us information that we need 6 in this stretch to, make any market improvements, or maybe we need only 2. And so we're going to try to get that sorted out, because once there's bacteria and other nutrients in the water, it's really hard to get it out of the water. So this is, just one thing we wanted to try to see if we can get any removals in stream. Is that the only one on this one? Okay, and here are the results, to which I can't speak to quite as good as Steve, because he's our number cruncher. So I don't know if you want to briefly review that.
Yeah, so these are the E. coli counts that we had done by either St. Ambrose or a laboratory in LeClaire. And what I was doing, basically the numbers, the difference is in the 3rd column from the left, and then the percent decrease. So overall, obviously E. coli fluctuates up and down, but I was able to kind of see about a 27% average decrease from upstream of these filters to downstream. That's kind of where we're looking at. Like, what do I feel like statistically, that is there something going on, or is this just randomness? And I do feel like there is some kind of decrease. Obviously, this was kind of a blind experiment. We didn't know how many to do and the spacing. These people in Ohio, they just threw them in because they were looking more to make fish habitat. So they really couldn't tell me much except for this is how you build them and they don't wash away. So Amy and I we really just designed on the fly, and I think it turned out really well. They didn't wash away, and we've had some pretty good gully washers going through there. So I didn't notice any increase in any other parameters, like nutrients, but it's a different setting than what the folks are in Ohio. So we're just going to keep on experimenting with it and see. But if we can get some kind of decrease in the E. coli, that's something that we don't really have a lot of weapons in our arsenal about. So, and this is just a chart, same data, just to put on a chart where the light blue is the downstream sample, the upstream is, or the dark blue is the upstream sample. You just kind of see, well, in general, the light blue bar didn't go as high as the dark blue bar over time. That's basically where I'm at. Special projects, is this me? So, and we have special projects as well, so these are different things that we're involved with, whether we're leading it or not. I'm doing okay on time. Okay. Where we went through, and there's a lot of signs on the Duck Creek Watershed Parkway that if you haven't noticed that you can't read, or they're illegible, or they're not relevant anymore. So we worked with both cities to kind of replace those. I've got 50 new signs there. I think they're all pretty much up. Yep. And a new logo. I think that on the right, bottom right-hand side is a picture of one of those signs. Like I mentioned earlier, we're working with Augustana College in Hickory Creek and Silver Creek watersheds they want to do a variety of different studies, not just with water quality, but even like the social aspect and the biological aspect with the floodplain forestry and things as part of their advanced environmental classes. They're getting the students to go out there. So I wouldn't say it's free labor, but it's reduced cost labor where these kids get a benefit of an actual study, and Davenport, essentially it's working with Davenport, gets a focused study that would probably cost $10,000 to $50,000 in consultants fees, and we can all benefit from it. One of the things that was this past fall was this Center for Environmental Cooperation grant that the city of Davenport ended up being involved with, and partner was as well, about marine litter. And the CEC is some kind of NAFTA group that was formed between Canada, Mexico, and United States. The Quad Cities was chosen as a spot to award this grant, along with Mexico City and Toronto. How we got there, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. So basically to put in litter collection devices and see how they work and do a pilot study. And we just pulled those devices. They were in the beginning of June, July, and they were in a few different spots. And they were pulled at right around Halloween. And the data is going to be collected and see, is this something feasible? Will it work? How would it work? And things. I was hired by the company that got the grant to manage them. So I kind of know these delivered devices really well and how easy or not easy it would be to use. So, but they did collect stuff and they did work, and we had some major storms and they did not get taken away. So it's a way to get in the streams that's a little more active than just having a cleanup every once in a while. And then the Duck Creek small boat access was, how many does Davenport have planned or in?
There are 2 in 2 or 3.
Two in and 2 or 3 planned, where this is just basically, if you haven't been to Duck Creek, you'll know it's steep banks. It's not easy accessible. Davenport went in and made areas where you can get in there and not just put like a kayak in, but maybe you can get down and play in the water or fish, have some kind of access where you're excluded from it now, unless you want to break your ankle. And so one of these things that I kind of did in conjunction with this, that CEC study was, I went to a spot in Bettendorf once a month for a year and use this app called the Marine Collector Device that you mark what kind of trash you find. And so I would walk about half a mile, and this is my graph of all the data I found. I collected about 1,200 pieces of trash in a year and just broke it down by what's part styrofoam, miscellaneous plastic, those kind of things. And that's something that kind of gives us an idea like, well, what really is out there? What are we actually finding? I only dropped my phone like 3 or 4 times in the water. So I probably should have included that in there, but it still works amazingly. So, and then Mike, I think this is you.
All right, well, we're kind of wrapping things up here, but I think you've had a chance to see a lot of the different things that partners have been involved with. And I think it's pretty impressive when you consider that this is all being done with primarily with volunteers. We get funding from a variety of sources, but I think it's a real success story for Scott County, where we've had the county and the municipalities in the county have come together, pooled their resources, and have made it a priority to try to be proactive about water quality in Scott County. And you don't see that in a lot of other counties in Iowa. And as was mentioned earlier, most of our water originates in the county. And so as of right now, except for a very small corner of the county, we are not considered a high priority watershed by DNR or the Iowa Department of Ag. And so if we want to make improvements in Scott County, it's up to us to do it. And so we have to take the initiative. So looking ahead for what's going to be going on in 2023 with partners, we're going to continue to do our forums, but we're going to transition from monthly forums to quarterly. So look for those spaced out throughout the year, where we'll be bringing topics that we think would be of interest to residents of Scott County, and try to help with the education component of that. Snapshots, we'll be doing those again in May, July, and October. So if you were intrigued by something you heard here today, be sure to look for those and volunteer to help on one or more of those collection days. I'm going to continue to do education and outreach with getting into classrooms, talking with local community groups who are interested in having speakers talk about water quality. So if you're involved with any other organizations, please reach out, because we're more than happy to go share our knowledge. Looking to do some more workshops, bring in experts from outside the county when needed to help inform folks in the county on how they can better manage their resources. Like an example, you saw the pond management workshop that we did this past year. Cleanups are always going to be a big thing. It takes time and effort to organize cleanups, to identify sites that could use some help, and then to track down people who are willing to do that. And I think we've had very successful partnerships with a lot of different groups as far as getting volunteers to help with some of these cleanups. And then other activities, we'll continue to do site visits as requested by individuals, and looking to maybe try some new things too, maybe get some art involved, and look at maybe doing a mural in the future to help. Just another way to reach out to the community and just raise the awareness. A lot of people don't even, have any idea what specific watershed they even live in, where they're at. And so the more we can do to inform people of their sense of place and where they're at, and how their actions and their property can impact, everyone around them, because water doesn't really care about, county boundaries, municipal boundaries, and things like that. And I think you've heard and seen in the data that we've been collecting that, water quality is everybody's issue. It's not any one particular group. So big thank you to our sponsors. We receive funding from Scott County and the city of Davenport, are two of our big funders, but we also get funds from other municipalities. Eastern Iowa Community College is a big help. Iowa Corn and some Nahant, City of Bettendorf, City of Eldridge, Extreme, and lots of individuals as well. So really appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to reach out to us if you have any questions or issues. We'd be more than happy to try to answer them. And with that, we'll wrap things up, and we'll take any questions. So thank you. Yeah, Judith.
Hi, I just wanted to say that the city of Davenport is doing a pilot program on cutting down the amount of salt we put on the road, and they're going to be doing it in the Ridgeview area, we believe, right now. If it gets supported, we're having a meeting with the neighbors to practice and see if we can cut down the amount of salt we put on the roads and still have safety.
Okay. Is that just using less salt or using an alternative to
Well,
salt?
they actually do the brine. It's brine.
Right. Okay.
the beak run, yeah.
Okay. Cool, very good. Yes,
I have a question where those, what do they call those? The things that you had in Robin Creek that you put in. I've been trying to find those. I go down to the dog park and I go on the fork trails and I've been looking all over for, where are they? There's like 3 of them.
you want to repeat the question for the online people?
Yeah, the question was, where exactly are those darn biofilters that are at Robin Creek? It's all the roofs. No, they are a bit hard to find. I get lost back there, especially, I think it's easier probably now if there's no vegetation. But you basically have to be on the bank to see it, you know,
There's signs by 2 of them.
Yeah.
There is.
and one is way quite far upstream. Go ahead. Ann.
That's okay. Yeah, one is just north of the actual wooden bridge that Fork constructed. If you just look, yeah, north, I don't know, depends on which side you are on. And then one is in the middle that you can see better from the west side. And one is on the north where they've got a low flow stream crossing. It's just north of
It's
there.
actually near the dog park, though. It's not like further down. No, if you go in the dog park and then go to the left, instead of the right, okay, on that path. And that most upper one is when you're walking along the creek and there's a white house in front of you. That's the upper one. Okay, okay, maybe I'll find it then. Yeah, okay, so I took some pictures the other day.
Yeah, and they're oftentimes they're the same color as the water in the surroundings, so they're a little tough. But I think your best bet would be to go to the wooden bridge they constructed and look to the north, and you'll see where one is.
Okay.
The trails.
Yeah, Curtis.
Did you say that the city of Davenport and Duck Creek, they're kind of smoothing or leveling out some of the entrances to the creek, so people will be more inclined to go down there and splash around, or possibly a kayak if the water is raised?
Yes, some of us were talking about the water trails and how they have one on Wapsie and how awesome it is. Duck Creek is, a couple magnitudes smaller than that, but we thought, part of the building stewardship is getting people connected with that water. So at Eastern Avenue Park off of 29th Street over by Annie Wittenmeyer is one of them. And then another one is at the north end of the Duck Creek Park loop, kind of by the golf course, where we essentially just made a ramp and some steps and then kind of tapered it back, put in a couple other limestone areas just where you could sit. We put in some wooden lunkers, manufactured boxes essentially tucked in under the rock to create some habitat for fish. So just to kind of make it so that fish will be there. So if you go fishing, you might have a better chance of catching one, but we have plans to put in a few more, Marquette and Jungi and potentially near the Fairmount Library eventually. And we do have a sign that's being manufactured right now that will go at Eastern. It'll have a QRL code on it. So when we do put that, will lead to a map. So when we do put more in, the county graciously helped to update that map. So you'll be able to see where each of them are. And then hopefully we can get Bettendorf to jump on board and get a couple in down through their area as well. So you can, get out of the creek before you get into the river would be a good idea.
I think that's great for the community to have that. I think it makes your an assessment of E. coli in the creek even more important. And maybe you might encourage to do, or maybe have somebody support that more deeply if kids are going to be playing in it. And
Sure. Yeah. And anything we can do to get those numbers down would be helpful because people are in the creek regardless of if it's going to be harmful, if it gets in your mouth or not. I don't think anybody's drinking it, which is great. We don't advise that, but I see people in it. I take my canoe in there with my husband and son, and there's always kids in there, in some of the shallower mud flats. So it's a resource people are using, but since it's so difficult to get to, I think the easier we make it, the more folks that would enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah, and if it wasn't clear, this little bit might be hiding it here, but Partners was part of the funding. We helped to fund this project, and so the sign down here, you can barely see our logo is on here. I couldn't zoom in too much, otherwise you just couldn't see anything on this.
And the RDA provided a big grant for that for materials. So
And there is more information about this project getting into the specifics on the partners website under the technical guidance tab. And I see you have some questions online. So one of our questions is, do we have trends based on seasonality of testing?
I have not gotten into the data that far.
Here, just say not sure. Here.
This is Steve. On that question, do you have trends based on the seasonality of testing? I've not gotten that far yet. Just for a long time, we basically just had spring and fall samples, and with a few years, we added summer as well. So hopefully that will be something I can look at more as we get more data in.
The next question might pertain to you here too. More visible water quality projects over the last 2 years. Is that Westlake? Who's setting baseline data on input and output areas to show public this work is cost effective?
Yeah, the DNR in conjunction with the Scott County Conservation Board is leading that effort. They've asked for our help in the future, but right now they're just letting things settle down. But DNR is kind of leading that.
Any other questions from folks on Zoom or in the room? All right. Well, thank you all in person and online for being here with us today and taking the time to listen to all the stuff we've been really excited about. So like Mike said, lots of big stuff planned for next year, and we hope you'll join us then as well. Thank you.